Hi everybody, welcome to Daily Deco. It is Thursday, I believe, and let's get straight into the news. I don't think a great deal has actually changed on the Simply Scuba website. I don't think I actually looked at it yesterday, but I didn't get any news that anything new or exciting is coming. But in the actual world of sort of scuba diving news, a few news stories caught my eye. The first one is microplastics in the Maldives has been sort of measured as a new sort of a record high, unfortunately. Previously, when they were sort of analysing sand for microplastics, anything smaller than, I think it's like 5 millimeters, it's I forget the place, but it's somewhere in India. Used to be sort of the worst place because it had the highest concentration, but scientists have been sort of analysing sort of sand samples around certain places in the Maldives, and they found even higher concentrations. And they're not a million miles away, the Maldives, from India, but it's a unfortunate record that has just been broken, and the beautiful Maldives now has sort of more microplastics than anywhere else that they're aware of, so that's tragic. There's also a looming oil disaster in the Caribbean. So this is a oil tanker that, for I think political reasons, the US sort of put sanctions on it or did something. So basically the entire crew had to almost abandon ship and literally just leave it where it was. And it's been there for quite a while, late 2019. It's just been sat there, just no one on board, but it's apparently just chock full of sort of barrels of oil, and if you look at pictures of it, it's just kind of listing to one side. Apparently, investigators have been on board recently, and they say it's actually fine. It's perfectly horizontal. They're sort of dual hull because they have two separate hulls just in case of a collision. They're both fully intact, and there's no sort of water on board. All of the generators and all that kind of stuff, they seem sort of fully functional. But now they're planning to sort of decant this oil off of this ship, and it could be 5 times worse than Exxon and Valdez in Alaska, because they're planning to sort of unload hundreds of thousands of these sort of barrels from this ship to another ship, and it just has all the hallmarks of something going terrible. And this is in the Caribbean Ocean, I believe. The southern Caribbean is under threat from a looming oil disaster that could be 5 times worse than Exxon Valdez in 1989. So, this ship, Nabarima, it was a Venezuelan oil tanker, part operated by Italian energy giant Eni, and it's carrying 1.3 million barrels of oil. This is just kind of terrifying because, in that sort of Gulf of Mexico, sort of Caribbean Ocean sort of area, it's just going to destroy everything it touches. So, we do need to be very careful. Again, this is one of those sort of news stories that you don't really see kind of flashed around because there's so many other things going on in the world. That this one actually could be quite sort of terrifying for not just scuba divers, obviously, but the entire ecosystem of the sort of Caribbean and that sort of central sort of American area. So, that's something worth keeping an eye on. And the last news story that caught my eyes is this is Emmy award-winning underwater cinematographer and naturalist Johnathan Bird. He is sort of hosting a new TV show that's due to sort of be on the air November the 1st, where he's sort of exploring the underwater worlds, and he's sort of exploring some of these sort of former slave ships and everything. So this is going to be sort of fascinating to sort of learn about the history of these ships, and just to get people seeing sort of underwater sort of footage, because a lot of these sort of recovery and sort of historical kind of documentaries, they kind of talk about the shipwrecks, but they don't really show people in the water, the divers actually sort of exploring them and sort of mapping them. So this one should hopefully be sort of demonstrating and sort of getting scuba divers across into the media so that more people who aren't scuba divers look at it and go, oh, hey, that would be quite cool just to explore a shipwreck. Yeah, it's kind of educational as well. So yeah, definitely keep an eye out for that. Okay, and that was about it. There are a few other stories. Again, I don't want to sort of run out of news stories later in the week, so I'm going to keep some of them secret. So I'm just going to jump straight into your questions. So the first one comes from the LK0998, and they ask, can you guys do in-water videos? Yes, that's definitely on the books. Can't do them sort of right now, mainly because I still have my sort of man flu. Oh, if people were sort of paying attention, a few days ago we were talking about my sniffles. I've had 2 separate coronavirus tests. They both came back negative, so it's just man flu. But of course, it's not conducive to diving. So I'm not going to be in the water for a little time before I just get myself back up and running. But yeah, it's definitely on the books. We're definitely planning to sort of get in the water. I actually had a good chat with someone from dive center abroad, looking to do some videos out there. So yes, we're hopefully going to be doing some in-water stuff, which is going to be a bit more interesting than just me in my dive locker. So yeah, hopefully we'll be getting it in the water. Ham Shackleton asked, welcome back. Hi, we're back. Probably a stupid question, in brackets, but not as stupid as not asking. Very true. I had my cylinder tested and filled last November, so 2019, but due to one thing and another, I never got to use it. Then COVID came along, so it's looking like it will not get used until mid-2021. Will the ordinary squashed air in it still be good to use, or should I vent it off and start fresh when I can get out and about? So this is actually a fascinating question and goes to prove that there are no stupid questions, because I imagine most people would sort of kind of say, well, nothing's really changed to it. Granted, it's kind of stale, but it's still air. It's a compressed gas cylinder. Nothing can really sort of change inside of that. But actually, it can be dangerous. I mean, that's a worst case scenario. But the general consensus, and this again is another thing that we don't really teach. It's just kind of one of those things that you kind of learn if you've looked for it and researched it, or if you've sort of been in the industry. But actually, you shouldn't really store completely full cylinders for any great length of time. You should never empty them, because empty cylinders just invite sort of moisture to get inside. But actually, completely full cylinders are actually quite dangerous after a sort of given amount of time. So the general consensus is about 3 months, I believe. If you sort of fill a cylinder, then if you leave it sort of 3 months without sort of using that gas, then you should really kind of sort of change that over for some fresh gas. And there are a few reasons for that. The first one is that no matter how many kind of filters that we put the air through, there's always going to be a teeny tiny amount of moisture inside of that tank. And regardless of where you get it filled, if something's under a great amount of pressure inside of a tank, even if there is a tiny little bit of moisture inside of it, that increase in pressure is just going to increase the rate of corrosion inside of your cylinder. So actually, having a completely full cylinder for a long time is just inviting sort of a greater amount of corrosion. So actually, yeah, after 3 months, you should really kind of vent it off. But if you're planning to sort of store your cylinders, so I imagine a lot of people who are still in kind of lockdown, they're not going to be scuba diving for any greater time, might now really be thinking about their scuba diving cylinders and going downstairs and actually venting them off a little bit. Because especially if you have nitrox, because with nitrox, if you have a high percentage of oxygen, the whole sort of rust and corrosion, most of it is just oxidization. So a high percentage of oxygen whilst under pressure is just making it even worse. So it could actually sort of create a greater amount of rust and actually damage your cylinders. So yeah, if you've had cylinders completely full and you haven't used them for more than 3 months, then yeah, it's probably worth kind of venting them down to sort of 20 bar or something. You still want some gas inside of it, not completely empty, but yeah, definitely sort of vent it. And also when you're storing them, it's also good to store them stood upright. I tend to sort of lay my tanks down because I figure, well, at least they can't kind of fall over. But actually, the weakest part of a cylinder for corrosion is the main body, the main length of it. The strongest part is usually the shoulders and the butt, the bottom part of the tank, because that's where it's thickest. So actually, if they're stood upright, if there is some corrosion, then chances are it's going to be down at the bottom, and that's kind of the best place for it. So yeah, if you have your tanks and they've been sort of in storage for any great length of time, then yeah, it's worth getting them kind of tested and definitely kind of vent them off and sort of get some fresh air, because that's another thing. With the sort of the corrosion, the oxygen can actually be sort of used up, and it can become carbon monoxide. So yeah, I think there's been like 1 recorded death from it, because someone had this sort of really old gas inside of their tank, and they just kind of went on a dive. So yeah, actually, very interesting question, which a lot of people don't really think about. But yeah, if you've had a tank that's been completely full for any great length of time, it is worth just kind of draining it off and getting some fresh air, especially steel tanks. I don't think alley tanks are quite so susceptible, but still, yeah, it's good to freshen that air up. Now, that's a fascinating question. The next one comes from Kaylier. Welcome back. I've been going through your back catalogue to keep my fix in check. I presume that's autocorrect. I can't think what fix would be. But they ask, are IFG, Internet Fusion Group, are they also the owners of Simply's own product lines? For example, the torch. So yes. So when the Internet Fusion Group bought Simply Scuba, they sort of bought all of pretty much most of it, except for the what you call it, like physical, tangible stock and whatnot. So that's. But yeah, all of the like intellectual properties. Yeah. So yeah, the Mark I torch. It's not going to come back tomorrow, but it's definitely sort of in our books, as it were. I've got sort of all of the specs for it. So yeah, they will start to sort of come back, because that was always a very popular torch. It was small and powerful. I think mine's upstairs. But yes, yeah, to answer your question, yeah, because we started to move into a lot of own brand stuff, which did very well. We always wanted it to be a sort of decent quality, but for a reasonable price. So yeah, hopefully they'll start to come back. It's yeah, again, we just got to sort of build the foundations before we then sort of get onto that. Yeah, go on, one more question. So the final one comes from Ricardo Ekman, and they ask, what is your experience diving with a ring system for the dry gloves against a dry glove model with a conical cuff that seals against the wrist? Pros and cons. I'm grateful for an answer. By the way, welcome back. You guys are the best. Thank you. So pardon me. So yeah, so 2 different ways of getting a dry glove system to sort of cover your hand. So your hands are dry. You either get a dry glove ring system that fits to your dry suit. So my dry suit, for example, it has a ring system for silicone cuff seals, and then that kind of rigid ring then clicks onto a separate ring that has the dry glove. So the only thing that's sealing it is just a single O-ring around my cuff, and that way it's kind of all integrated. A second way is where you literally get a dry glove that has its own cuff seal attached. So it's a completely separate entity, and then that kind of seals against your wrist, either over your cuff seal of your dry suit, or you can wear it with a wetsuit or just by itself. So there's a few benefits of sort of the integrated ones. I prefer them because they're a bit more streamlined. You've got fewer seals around your cuffs. You just have that O-ring on that kind of halo ring that goes around your wrist. And it's a little bit easier to sort of equalize. So I usually put a teeny tiny little capillary tube. It's just a small silicone straw, basically, that goes underneath my cuff seal, and that just allows air from my dry suit to get into my dry glove, because as you go down, without that, it's a completely sealed sort of pocket of air, so that's going to compress at depth, so your hands just get vacuum packed into your dry glove system. But if you use that capillary tube, you can transfer some gas, so it's much more comfortable. Now, completely independent glove systems, I've used these before up in the Arctic, and yeah, they're fine. They do the job. They're not that easy to get on and off, especially that second glove. If you try and think about how easy it is to put a second wetsuit glove on, trying to put a second dry glove on is just as hard, especially because you have no dexterity, so you do need a tender, a guy to actually sort of help you get that seal nice and neat. Another problem is that I find they tend to sort of push off of your hand a bit, so you do get a little bit of not really abrasion, but just kind of pressure on your on the sort of the bone of your thumb around your wrist, because it's kind of they're that little bit more further away. They can't go sort of as far up your wrist as an integrated dry glove system. You have two cuff seals, so you have even more kind of latex or silicone around your cuffs, so if they're brand new, they can be quite snug around your wrist and actually sort of cut off blood flow, and then trying to get a capillary tube underneath, again, it's just sort of added grief. So it can be cheaper to go down the sort of independent dry glove system, and I've done it before. They do the job, but they are a bit more hassle kind of before the dive, and if you don't have that seal kind of just right, then you can sort of be in trouble. That actually happened to me once. It wasn't the seal, it was actually the tape that goes around it. It wasn't actually glued down properly, so I'm diving along, my hands just getting sort of slowly colder and colder, and that ended up numb. That was actually up in the Arctic Circle, so yeah, that wasn't my best dive. Yeah, ever since I changed to a integrated dry glove system, I'll never go back. I love dry gloves just because of the dexterity, the practicality. Yeah, they are a little more dangerous if you do sort of rip or sort of tear one. If you do that to a neoprene glove, it's not really the end of the world because your hands are wet anyway. The neoprene sort of wetsuit glove is still going to do its job. If you do that with a dry glove, then you're in a bit more trouble. But no, I'd always lean towards integrated dry glove systems instead of independent, just because they're much more practical. They're much easier. It'll take me about I don't know, 30 seconds to put my my integrated dry glove systems on, but it'll take a good sort of 2 minutes to get an independent dry glove system on. They're just that much more of a sort of pain to physically sort of get everything just right. And that's it today. Yeah. Again, if you have any sort of questions or comments or queries or even corrections, then of course let us know down in the comments below. We'll try and get to them as quickly as possible, and then I'll probably sort of answer them in tomorrow's show. This weekend is obviously Halloween. I don't know if anyone's sort of got any plans for it. I've seen quite a few divers have been doing sort of underwater pumpkin carving competitions and a few other bits and bobs. I do have a video that's due to go live on Halloween, talking about different costume ideas and different sort of things that you can do for Halloween. So stay tuned for that. Yeah, thank you for watching, and of course, safe diving.